Welcome to For the Record, a conversation series where we talk to music heads about their stories and the music that makes them. Today, I'm chatting with someone who those who are following along already know. He's been in my position a couple times. It's great to see you here, Ben. It's great to connect.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Keegan. When you were asking me to hop on, you asked if I want to be on the other side of the mic, and I just like read that really fast and didn't immediately recognize that I'd be chatting in this respect today. But yeah, really stoked to be here.
Yeah, I got that when you asked me who is the guest. Like you.
You are, man.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, right, yeah, maybe I should be a little less online, because then you can have like three different meanings for one phrase if
Yeah.
you're just online for like a little bit too long.
True. True. Um, cool. Well, so for all of these, like to start at the beginning and just get a better sense of your story. I know have had this chat to a certain extent a few times, but I'm sure I will learn some new things about you, which I'm looking forward to, and just hearing about your roots and where you're from, and when your relationship with music started.
Yeah, of course. I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and it's like very nice, like 40 minutes from New York City. Um, I think growing up, music was always such a huge part of my household. Both my parents actually sang in my church choir growing up, which is, I
Cool.
think, like a really early, um, amongst a couple other things, like a really early uh, kind of like introduction into the music making process, if that makes sense. But outside of that too, like my dad listened to a lot of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Bob
Mm.
Dylan, the band, Rolling Stones, stuff like that. Spent a lot of time in Boston, so he like when he was younger, so like he really just like got to witness that Boston music scene in the '80s specifically, and kind of just carried that with him growing up. Whereas my mom listened to a lot of the Grateful Dead and the
Mm.
Beatles and stuff like that.
Cool.
So I just had a lot of folk music and just a lot of rock going on in the house, and then really interesting, like it's like the holidays now, and I just like think back to when I was a kid, the specific types of like holiday albums that were played. Paul Winter, who's this like soprano saxophonist, has this Winter Solstice album that I could like hear just ringing throughout my house in my head. Um, Stuff or George Winston, who's probably my favorite pianist. He has this album called December, which is
Oh,
like
that's a good.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful record. Yeah. Uh, Mom always was it Al's Restaurant? What's the name? It's a Thanksgiving. I'll think about it. There's a Thanksgiving song. It's like 11 minutes long. I'll find it after. But anyway, yeah, so just a lot of music like that, and I was a band kid. I played a lot of clarinet and saxophone growing up. I went to band camp for about 7 years, which is where I learned how to play guitar and stuff like that. So music making was huge in my life. I took a couple years off and like went back into bands like later in high school, and there was this like 4 or 5 year period where I got kind of like delved into my own music taste. My first album that I ever owned was a Simple Plan record. Then I remember buying American Idiot and stuff like that, really just
Mhm.
exposing myself to that like pop punk world. Um, and like from an early age, I was just like really into finding artists early. Um, like, really just enjoying, I think it was an ego thing too, just even at,
Mhm.
like, age 11 or 12, just, like, I remember when I found Drake really early, and I was like, "Wow, this is really cool." Early in the context, like, my friend group, you know what I mean? Which
Mhm.
is all that
Mhm.
mattered to me.
Right.
Same with Frank. I actually didn't listen to a lot of Kanye West growing up. I, like, feel like, um, I was, like, really heavily into Drake at the time. And then from there, I kinda moved back into, like, the electronic space, um when I like got back into bands, and that the electronic space is really what kind of carried me through my adolescence, I think, taste wise. I was like producing a ton of music at the time. I taught myself Ableton like towards the end of high school, early college, and kind of met this kind of made my first or one of two music communities. There was two sides of it. And I remember being put in this Facebook Messenger group chat with these guys who were all just like making music. And they were like my first like music artist friends at the time, you know, and we would just like send stems back and forth and produce stuff together. It was like so much fun.
Mm.
Um, that was great. And then at the same time too, I like got in touch. There's this guy in my college fraternity, actually, this guy named Tyler Switsky. When I was producing and I was still finding artists really early and I was doing some music internships at the time too. He was like, "Hey Ben, like you're really good at this. Have you ever thought about writing about it?" I write for this blog called Hilly Dilly. There's this guy named Chad who's, you know, really cool, and I think you'd really enjoy writing for this blog. You feel like you'd fit right in. So I started writing for Hilly Dilly at the time, which is when I really began my discovery taste and what I thought was good. Um, it was probably the first time I was getting like, yeah, like real time feedback over like what I thought was a good song. And that's when my taste began to re-expand, I'd say. So it left from like electronic into more just like holistically like pretty much any genre of music. With pop sensibilities, because kind of how I describe it, you know. I
Mhm.
think that was what I was like covering a lot, so it didn't matter what genre. Um, but like that really helped me kind of like figure out what I wanted to do. I wanted to do music. I went to the college in New Jersey and I studied like international business and Spanish. And I was writing for Hilly Dilly, making music at the time. And I kind of realized like as much as I loved making music, if I wanted to like make it a career, I had to kind of just like figure out what I was good at and round out the edges. And I was so much better at discovering artists early than I was at being one.
Mm.
And so I really thought being an A&R would be really cool. It sounded fun and glamorous and
Mhm.
like definitely like the end goal that I had decided I wanted to have when I was like 19 years old. So I worked towards that. I wrote for a couple blogs, did a couple internships at A&R and stuff like that. Um, got better and better, did some consultancy gigs in A&R. Then I spent a couple years at APG for a bit, then at 1 RPM as like a more formal A&R, just to like traditional deals and helping develop and scale them. Um, During that time, Hilly Dilly had kind of rebranded into Before the Data. So I was still kind of like covering new artists on that front, especially during the pandemic, is when the rebrand happened. And we would do these feedback sessions on Twitch once a week for like 90 minutes to 2 hours. And artists would send us their songs. And we would just like listen to like the first verse hook, sometimes more, usually a lot less, and give some like real time feedback of the songs and kind of built up
Mm.
this like really cool online community from there. And it was a lot of fun. It passed the time. And I think like at that time, I was just like, I was finding so much music. I remember for me personally, like when I think back into like my discovery time and when I found the music that meant the most to me or I could like point to was, uh, yeah, 2019, 2020, which is really interesting in hindsight. Um, and yeah, taste-wise, it was just there was a lot of like artists in that year. I remember we debuted this artist named Kamari, who has since gone on to have a really great career. At the time, it's like a standout. I remember getting sent that song and listening to it all the time. This artist named Christiane, this artist named Wallace, kind of like pop, almost like Lorem type artists at the time is how I,
Mm.
for better or worse, describe that area of music. You know. Um, but yeah, and then once the pandemic hit, I think that's when my taste really began to kind of evolve. I remember like my friend Cole Ryan, who I moved was doing stuff before the data with, and kind of moved on to Dreams Never Die stuff with after that. Had this huge playlist. I feel like I've sent it to you called Palette Cleansers. And Cole was like
Yeah.
really into like a lot of world music at the time, way before I was. Um, but getting sent Palette Cleansers is like this massive playlist, like 120 people follow it. You can add music you find, but it has to be kind of weird world music, and there's like a editorial aspect to it. So the playlist owner, Cole, has freedom to kind of remove stuff if it doesn't fit the vibe of the playlist. And following that playlist like totally opened up my taste again.
Mm.
That was a huge pivotal point in my taste. And then I would say back in 2019 too, another pivotal point was I became friends with this guy named Jason Dierks, who was a coworker of mine when I was at United Masters. And Jason kind of like reintroduced me to like pop punk and got me really into turnover at the time. And
Mhm,
then from there my taste like really moved outward back away from um yeah, like more commercial stuff and like more like niche tastes towards like the indie folk space a lot nowadays. Um in terms of like what I like to work on and stuff like that. Indie rock, things like that. And then like just stuff I like to listen to, just stuff that's doesn't matter where or when it was made, just having appreciation for like the different ways music can connect folks, you know. Um but yeah, and then like in that time too, I just remember kind of dabbling in management and stuff too. I just want to give a quick shout out for some of those like great artists that I had the pleasure to work with. The first one
sure.
that I ever worked with was this artist named Danny Cara, who is a really successful artist in like the electronic space. Um, I worked with this artist named Belle for a while, who is one of the most talented songwriters I've ever worked with. She's incredible, and she's actually on tour right now with Girl House, who I met in the early days too. I actually saw them last night. It was like a really
Oh,
nice
nice.
special experience to kind of see them all play together. Yeah, Girl House sold out Mercury Lounge. It was great.
Oh, cool. I love
Um,
Mercury Lounge.
yeah, yeah, it's incredible. But yeah, and now like I'm just at a place where I'm just like really excited to work on music I like. Um, I think like for a while I wanted to work on stuff that I thought others would like or that would like make money, candidly, right? Um, but I think there is a middle ground, and also I don't think it's worth sacrificing my own personal like the way I can interact with the music industry now has changed a lot. I think for me to have a healthy relationship with it, the stuff I'm working on, I have to feel like I
Mhm,
like just because, you know, and then whatever comes after is almost consequential to that entire thing.
mhm. No, that seems, that seems to be the right order. I mean, do it for love. Um,
Yeah,
and it's oftentimes, I think, pretty easy to see through someone who is really trying to champion something that they don't quite believe in. Um,
I
so if you can
agree.
align those two things, that's when the magic happens. Um,
Y-
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna add on very quickly to say that in my experience, the I think there are folks out there, myself included, first and foremost for a long time, who I would work on things that I thought was good, and I like the people too. Um, but to have like scalable long term commitment to a project, I think there needs to be more to the relationship than how others will feel about it. You know,
Hmm.
at least for me. So
Hmm.
I just add on with that little sentiment for myself.
Yeah. Is there, like a quantifiable rubric for like what you need to have to exist that to that type of connection between you and an artist, or is it like, you know, more in the gut, more visceral, and that's enough?
Do you mean like for a working relationship or just to
Yeah.
listen?
Yeah, for a working relationship, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think nowadays more than ever it's really values based, and I have to like the music too.
Right.
Um, but like, how does the artist want to live their life? How does their music fit into that? You know, how are they as a person? What's their communication style?
Hmm.
Um, stuff like that, which is very much like a working, just general work relationship. Um, I think nothing's perfect though, and I'm still learning like where the flexibility I want to maintain is with those sorts of dynamics for sure. Um, but yeah, and then like rubric wise, like I feel like I need to like love the music. There's this a good example is it hasn't come out yet, but there's this producer named Tyler Thompson who produced a lot of stuff for Girl House amongst a million other artists. He's putting out his Tyler's putting out their new project called Stinkus, which is like a very like Alex G regen type project, and we're going to be putting that out together in the new year. Um, and Tyler, I've known Tyler for years, and we have a really similar communication style. I think we work really well creatively. Um, and the way that he kind of went about making this record was like really like low pressure. Like Tyler just wanted to put out music that Tyler liked, and it ended up being like a 19 song project. And
Oh,
instead of overthinking it, and like maybe less, I'll say 15 to 19. But instead of overthinking it and being like, do we want to split this up into like three different albums? I specifically remember we had a conversation where like we were just like, no, let's just like put it out. It's not that big a deal, and we can write more music. Um, and I really like that emotional relationship to the release process, if that makes sense. Where it's like it's not that deep. It's all
mhm.
okay. We can put out this music and it'll be fine.
Yeah. It's hard not to be precious about, your own art and your own music, your own writing, whatever it is. So that's
Yes.
commendable, I think, to be able to let go like that. It's definitely something I'm working on.
Yeah, well, me too. I think it's a muscle, and it's easier for me to sit here and say that, right? Because I didn't make the music. So I think it definitely comes with time. And who knows, like maybe that there's no right or wrong way to do that, right? I think like it's good to be precious about art too, and I think everyone has their own relationship to like what should or should not come out.
Mhm.
Which is the best part. I just think like Mike Posner did an interview, hilarious. Like Mike Posner did an interview like a year ago, just talking about like his personal success, and like he start focusing on outcome a lot more than the actual process, and like the
Mm,
fulfillment that you get is the actual like sitting down aspect of making the art. Whatever else comes after is additive. So if you have the
mhm,
priority structure set up like that, if you've enjoyed making the actual music, it's the pressure becomes a lot less over how it's disseminated and like
mhm.
released, right? Because like it's not as important as like how you felt when actually making it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good that's a good perspective, I think. Um, cool. Well, that, kind of emotional connection to music seems like a good segue to start talking about the emotional connection that you have with music that you enjoy listening to. Um, so first, we'd love to hear how, you're an avid music discoverer. How do you discover music these days?
Uh, First off, the Craig Coalition Discord. Not even lying.
Got
um, this album by this artist named Jose Lobo was sent in by Brody Conley a couple weeks ago, and I've been listening to that nonstop.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
genuinely, it's like it's so good that I need to just mention it here. Um, but also honestly, like the bigger answer, just through people, I think I trust specific songs and like just like recommendations from people I know.
Hmm.
So if it's from fellow another curator, a friend, honestly, stuff like that. There's this artist friend named Boyhood, my friend AJ, and AJ sends me amazing music. AJ sent me this artist named Mali Velasquez like 2 weeks ago, and I've listened to Mali like every day since then. And I think the discovery experience is a lot more powerful when someone I care about has sent me it, if that makes sense.
Totally.
But yeah, then I still go through Spotify and stuff, of course. I have like a curation folder that I've accumulated over the years, and I'll sit down and like kind of go through all those songs. But less so nowadays than before, for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, it's too bad that like a lot of the emotional connection, is kind of abstracted away in a place like Spotify when you just have this unless you're really intentional about organizing, your library. Like I just have like 2,500 songs in my liked songs, which have come from, people that I care about. It's come from being in a bar and like, hitting Shazam, and from like 10 million other places. And if only that you could, because like you were saying, like, the impact that you have, or the impact that the music has on you, is inclusive of how you found that and who shared it with you. And if you can, kind of capture those two things together, that just makes the music a lot more powerful. And, unfortunately, like, I know that's happened in like my Spotify like songs, but it's easy to forget, and everything, kind of gets lost in a big, ocean of sameness. It needs
Yeah,
more
I totally
context.
agree. No, I totally agree. I think there's something to be said for just like um there's no space. I feel for myself there's like a lot less space to actually digest art and consume it in a healthy way when I'm just inundated with it.
Hmm.
Um so like the barrier to change songs is obviously so low, and the ease of access is that like you almost need a mindfulness aspect to just like keep listening and to actually sit with something.
Hmm.
I am notorious like still I'm not like still like my I have a friend that I grew up with who would still has a running joke that I like skip songs before they're over. And I do. And I'm trying my best to not, but I'll like just do the first verse and hook and be like, okay, I get it, and move on, which is a totally different type of listening experience than actually sitting with an album, for example.
Hmm.
Like, um, that Jose Lobo album, like I listened through that front to back, and I still do. Like I listened to that Mally Velasquez album front to back and a couple others, but it's just a very different type of experience than just like going song by song or just having a vast library of things.
Hmm.
Um, I have a family friend who still buys all of his music. He's based out in Los Angeles, and when I'm in LA, I stay with him. And he has the biggest iTunes library I've ever seen. It's like 25,000 songs, and he has like over 1,000 playlists. And like that's really interesting because there's something intentional about that.
Hmm.
Like the actual purchasing act changes the relationship to it. I think it's less passive.
Totally. Yeah, and there's something to it of like, I've paid for this. Now I'm going to spend time with it, and that's sort of, that's kind of the transaction. It's like I've invested in this already, and so I'm going to invest in it. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
I'll still hear like a track that, is part of a CD that I would, listen to like in the backseat of a car, have my Walkman, my headphones, and listen, to an entire CD straight through. And when I hear, a song that I used to listen to that way now, on like Spotify or something, or within the context of a playlist, I can still hear the beginning of the next song when that song is about to end, or
Mm,
what would be in the album, and then it transitions to like whatever else is in the playlist.
yeah.
Um, and it's, yeah, I look back to that as like, pretty nostalgically. It's like having that type of relationship with music, to like truly know it in, the context in which it was created.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with that. I keep bringing them up, Mally Velasquez. I'll leave it there. But like, there's any transition to the next song, and it doesn't actually happen. It's a different, very modern feeling. I think.
Hmm. Totally. All right. Well, speaking of new artists, that, I mean, maybe this is one of them. Who are three artists of note that you heard for the first time in the past year?
Yeah, definitely Mally Velasquez. I'll just leave it at. They're just great. I believe I forget what label Mally releases under, but there's this really cool label based out of Nashville called Acrophase, who work on like a lot of cool new artists that I really like, kind of like in the indie alternative space. Mally reminds me a lot of uh, Adrian Lanker,
Mhm.
with a slightly more pop sensibility, I'd say. That's my personal little comparison, but really, like, really, really good songwriter. Explores a lot of like fairly difficult themes to write about well, is how I'd put
Mhm.
it, and Mally does it really well. There's this new group out of New York called Frost Children that I think are this is another AJ recommendation.
Mhm.
But they put out like 100 gex style discography. Their catalog was like almost exclusively like really just like abrasive, energetic, like really cool stuff. And then they just put out a new album like a couple weeks ago, and it's not like that at all. I do
Mhm.
like 100 gex for what it's worth, but it's very interesting. Like the songwriting's really intentional. The melody choices are like very like poppy. Like it reminds me of like the type of like early 1975 melody choices, but they're so skilled. They're such skilled producers and the lead singer's vocal tone is like so crisp that it just leads to like really interesting like um kind of like sonic contrasts across the songs, you know, and they can still go hard if they want, but like I think because I know they can go hard and they don't, there's like a nice like cool creative restraint happening there that I appreciate
I
a
like
lot.
that.
Um yeah, and then lastly, there's this artist also based out of New York called Richard Orofino, who's um has his own project, but he also has a couple other projects. And he's just like an incredibly talented producer slash songwriter and stuff. He's worked a lot with Girl House in the past and a couple other folks whose music I really like.
Cool. Good trio. I don't know any of those, so I will be listening to them after the episode. Um, all right. Yeah, I know you already know all of these questions, but
No, that's okay.
most underappreciated artist from
I'm
your
ready.
favorite music decade.
Um, I'm gonna go with if you had asked me like a couple weeks ago, I would have given a different answer, but I think we talked about Life Without Buildings
Oh
just
yeah,
briefly a
yeah.
couple weeks ago. Um, but I'm gonna go Life Without Buildings during the early 2000s, kind of when the Strokes came out. I think like there's something really special about that band, and I still haven't stopped listening to their one album. Um, but there's this nice anecdote about them that I really like, where like they're from Glasgow, and they were picked to open up for the Strokes' first ever London headline show. This was like a couple months before Is This It came out, and they opened for the Strokes, and then like distanced themselves from the Strokes almost immediately after. Like they didn't even stay for the Strokes show; they left, and then like clarified like later on that like they were asked to show up, and um, they were asked to show up, and like this wasn't like who they identified as, and the drummer like less than a decade ago further clarified and was like, yeah, that wasn't us.
Hmm.
Um, so I think like what they did for the genre was like really interesting. And they only put out one album, but the album itself is like kind of perfect in my opinion. In this that genre of music, like early 2000s indie rock scene, I'd say. Um, like the lead singer, she just like had this like really easy, almost like spoken word style. She wasn't a singer; she was like a poet writer,
Mm-hmm.
with an incredible voice, of course. But she would do this like childlike, like jingle things. Like she would just like it was like she was like a child, like uttering like random phrases, but totally syncopated.
Mm-hmm.
It was like Talking Heads mixed with like Bjork is how I describe them, um, and
Yeah,
stuff like
that's a
that.
good
So
way.
yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, that's a good one. Um, I need to spend more time. Yeah, I mean, they were, I remember how much they affected you. They were also the theme of of the first edition of your newsletter. I remember.
Yes, yeah, I know. There's a couple other things that I'm working on for that, but they impacted me so much. My friend Jack Gawant has this like massive Spotify playlist, and I saw him listening to them, and I just kind of like peeked at them, and then I like went on a huge rabbit hole, and I was like, where have they been? How have I missed this? You know, it's
Yeah,
great though. It's like a new discovery for me. You know.
totally. I mean, just think of how many artists, exist that, are hiding, and then just, we just haven't crossed paths yet. There are, I'm sure, many thousands of
Yeah,
them.
that's a really optimistic take because I think for a while, especially this year, I'd gone through phases of like jadedness with music. Just my own, not because music's bad, but my own personal relationship to it changed, and I need to kind of like um, restart in a lot of ways. Um, so hearing something like that is like really great to hear, right? There's tons of artists out there. There's
Yeah,
so many that we'd like. We just have to
so
look
many.
or be shown them at the right time.
Indeed. We need to improve, our discovery and curation structures to make sure that we can find one another. I think that's
Hmm.
more the issue. Um, cool. All right. Here's the big question. You go into a desert island and you get to bring three records with you. What are they?
Um, I don't know. No, I think I do know. I think my answer probably changed last week. Honestly, my answer is I don't know. Um, but if I were to go today, I would pick There's this Japanese composer named Ryuichi Sakamoto who has this album called 1996, which is one of my favorite records this year that I was shown. I was just shown him in general this year too, and he's become like one of my favorites, maybe ever. Just in
That's
like
great.
his,
R.I.P.
he's
Yeah,
yeah, R.I.P. I've like watched countless interviews done by him slash about him in the last couple of months.
he's
My
great.
friend Shyler of Lingo sent me them. Shout out Shyler. Um, I'd probably go with Ben Howard, Every Kingdom from there. Hugely influential album for me. I just think he's an incredible songwriter and even better guitarist. And then probably Peripheral Vision today. Today, if I had to answer, Peripheral Vision by Turnover. Um, Probably one of my favorite records in the last like decade too, I'd say. Um, so I have like a
Cool.
nice mix of like different sorts of vibes for different moods and different themes and all that, you know.
Yeah, totally. I'm sure you'll feel all of the things, on your desert island. So it's good to be prepared with a good mix.
That's what you want, man. That's what you
Yeah,
want.
indeed. Um, cool, Ben. This has been really great. For people who have been listening and want to follow along slash get involved with the work that you're doing, where is the best place, for them to do that?
I would say honestly the Create Coalition Discord. I'm more active there, and then I have a newsletter called Digital Detour that I have a couple things lined up for the new year. Also, there's going to be a new kind of content series that we'll be building out on the Create Coalition side that I'll be helping um, orchestrate in the new year as well. So keep a lookout for that. But a lot of that will live genuinely on the Create Coalition Discord, and then um, anything else, find me on Substack. That's kind of where I'm going to be living most of the time outside of that.
Cool. It's a good couple places. And yeah, now lastly, uh, now that you've been through the ringer,
Mm.
who is another guest that you think would be great to have on?
Who? I think someone who would be great would be an old colleague of mine named Sean Mishra. Um, worked together at United Masters in A&R, but his music knowledge is incredible,
Mm,
genuinely.
mm.
Super varied taste too. Yeah, he's awesome. Based out in New York.
Cool. Cool. All right. Noted. Um,
Mhm.
cool, man. Well, this has been really great. I'm glad we got to do this. Thank you for your time and energy and your thoughts, and really appreciate the way that you think about music and the communities around it.
Yeah, likewise, Keegan. Thanks a lot for having me on. I always enjoy listening slash talking whenever required. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye.